Welcome back, everyone, to the Creative Kingdom Society, everybody's favorite show about creators who create things that inspire other people to create more things. This is Jake Ballentine. I'm here with Chuck Schofield, and today we are talking about the Jungle Cruise episode of Behind the Attraction from Disney Plus. Now, Skipper Chuck, you had a fun story you want to share about Disney Plus to start us out.
Well, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for welcoming me back. I figured since we were doing a review episode about the newest show on Disney Plus, I had to share this story. The other day, I was at downtown Disney and walking by a little kid, 5 or 6, and his mom, and they're looking up at that old ESPN Zone building, which I don't know if you've seen or been there recently at all, but it's covered in huge marketing posters promoting Disney Plus. So I don't think this mom knew or wanted to get into it, or if she did know with the kid what exactly this building was. So she just told the kid, "Oh, honey, that's where they filmed Disney Plus." Ooh. And I just thought, how hilarious is that there's a kid out there, and there's probably more than one, who actually thinks that Disney Plus is filmed in that building right there. That's amazing.
As if it's one show, as if the whole thing is like a factory. It's a show and movie factory.
I mean, the building almost looks like that. To a 5-year-old kid, it would almost look like that's what it was.
Yeah,
I thought that was hilarious.
Totally. Um, well, in today's episode, we'll be honest, both of us binged all 5 episodes right away, but we're going to be going over one episode at a time. So every week we're going to go over a different episode. Today we're talking all about the Jungle Cruise.
Oh, Jake, you know what else?
What's
Sorry
that?
to cut you off. We also wanted to start that other thing. Where we sort of allude back to that first episode, our first episode, where we went over the 9 categories of different creators and their creations. We don't want to do all 9 again. That'll take forever. But we thought it'd be fun to do at least one every week. What was someone that you ran into this week or consumed their creations this week? I have one that I totally want to share that's totally relevant. Doesn't even have to be relevant, though. What was one creator you consumed their content of this week?
Yes. So it was somewhat relevant. And the reason why it was somewhat relevant was I was waiting for Behind the Attraction. I wanted it to come, and I thought, well, what could I watch that would be similar to that? And of course, I thought about Offhand Disney and their great content that they create. That's all about different attractions and behind the scenes stories. And sometimes they're completely legitimate, and sometimes you can't tell what's a gag and what's actually real, which fit in with what the Disney Plus show was like, because it was a combination of entertainment and education. So Offhand Disney, I took a deep dive down a long rabbit hole of a lot of his videos.
I love his stuff. I love his intro. No, good stuff.
Yeah.
The one that YouTube that I ran across this week was entitled "What Will the Disneyland of the Future Look Like?" A show called Hard Reset by the YouTube channel is Free Think. And it went into all the tech behind the history of the immersive themed space experience, and how much more immersive it's going to get with virtual reality and augmented reality. And it's fun to see what's going on right now and what the next will be. And it just sort of totally blended together with this show, binging this show this week. So I thought it was relevant. Check it out if you haven't yet. But no, we thought that'd be a fun thing to do, to plug a little something real quick before we dove into the review. But as we do the review, two questions we want to focus on, 2 main questions we want to focus on. One, what did we like about the episode? And 2, following the spirit of this whole channel, what did the episode make me want to go do?
Yeah.
What call to action did I feel, either implicit or explicit? But we can both kind of answer both as we go through the episode, kind of chronologically. But let's go ahead and start with the intro difficulties turning the desert into a jungle. What were some of your first initial thoughts of that intro then?
Well, first, before we even go into this first episode, since this is the very first episode, the actual intro
Oh
set
yeah,
up this show
yeah,
as, I think this is so wonderful. Like, this is such a beautiful mix of education and entertainment, because immediately, as soon, it did the Spanish remain seated please, and as soon as that came in, you could see it was this quirky, funny, yet still educational. It was made by the same guy who did, or the director of it, also did the Toys Who Made Us and the movies that made us. Have you watched those on Netflix? Oh,
no, but I heard good stuff. Yeah,
you would love them. Very similar style.
I
I
think
didn't
I've
know
seen
that
one
that
of the episodes.
Yeah,
Actually,
they're really great. They go through all sorts of different toys. That's the toys one, the movies one. It's a lot of nostalgia type movies, but they're these pop culture sensation movies. And I don't know how to pronounce his name. Brian Volk Weiss. I don't know
I think
exactly
that's
how.
right.
Is that
That's
right?
right.
But really brilliant. You could see his handprints on it when you could see that quirkiness, because that's
Yeah,
what was in that other one. And I really like that, because nerds like us and other people watching this, well, we're all into Imagineering, and the Imagineering story and any documentary that tells us information. But the average watcher is going to get a little bit bored when it's just that educational kind of stuff, that history that we eat up. But this was just this beautiful mix, and I thought it was great.
yeah. Shame on me for skipping over that. It's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. But then it starts difficulties of turning a desert into a jungle. Okay, how are you going to do that? How I like a lot of the how and the
Yeah.
process sort of conversations. Um, I immediately was reminded of three fantastic episodes of the Disney History Podcast or Disney
Yes.
History Institute podcast, specifically about landscaping Disneyland, that talked extensively about landscaping all of the park, but specifically Jungle Cruise as well, and all the players and all the drama, and definitely worth going back and looking up. I'm going to bring that up again later, but a lot of good footage. Some of the footage we've seen before. Some of it was in color now. Some of it was restored. Some of it I hadn't seen before. A lot of good stuff. Did you catch right at the 1 minute mark, 1 minute and 9 second mark? Did you catch in the background? And I only caught this because I watched it more than once, right? A skipper fall off the dock.
No.
Go back and watch. It's like he tries to like step and like get the boat, but like he misses and like he catches himself with his hands and then it cuts away. Like I wonder if he fell in. I don't know. But like obviously back then there weren't like OSHA safety rules for
Yeah.
these sorts of rides, and they were all packed that day anyway. And anyway, it was funny. I actually laughed out loud when I saw it. But uh, uh,
I liked them talking about the origins of it, like with the what were they called, the true life adventures, them going through that. It was interesting. It reminded me of those, what was it, 9 interviews that were on the Season Pass podcast with Tony Baxter. He talked about IP in different in the parks, and he was defending the IP in parks today. And he's like, well, everyone's complaining about the IP in parks, but everything at Disneyland, the original Disneyland, was IP. It's just not IP that we talk about anymore.
yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting, because him talking about this was this. Now it's a stretch to say that, but that was what he was talking about. He's so positive, and anytime there's a criticism, except for if it's about the current version of Figment, outside of that, he's very positive. And so he's always talking about like how it all makes sense. But it was cool to see that this was really bringing the true life adventures into reality and giving people a way to see these things, because they just didn't get to see them at the time.
I do love how they did that. I do love how they focus on that point of this was a thing that most people weren't able to experience in any sort of way, and this let them taste a piece or pretend or put themselves there or that was fantastic. I was a little, I love the story they told. I am a little skeptical with regards to, were they were these documentaries actually made from the scraps of the footage that they took for the animation stuff? Or was that a convenient story? Or is that, or were they like inspired? Did they inspire the creation? Or were those documentaries actually made from these scraps? Like they sort of,
Yeah,
that would be interesting. And then there was one line where she said, the narrator was great, the
it
script was
was.
great, and the use of the timing of the humor and stuff, that was all great. But there was one line she said, that after, these 13 true life adventures, 8 of which received the Academy Awards and everything, that Walt's reputation was sealed as not just an animated filmmaker, but as a legitimate wildlife documentarian. A little skeptical alarm went off in my bell when went off in my head when she said that, because I at first I realized I don't think I've ever seen any of these.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen clips, but I
Yeah.
don't think I've ever seen any of them. But I remember some controversy about how a lot of these documentaries were staged and like pushing the lemmings over the hill, like some
Mm-hmm.
shady,
Yeah.
unethical sort of storytelling staging that A, aren't true, and then B, kind of disingenuous how they're celebrated. So like we said in our first episode that we always are going to be positive. This isn't going to be a negative. It's easy to talk negatively about Disney, but I do think it's fair to criticize sometimes that corporate over sanitization of a revisionist sort of history.
Mm.
So like that part rubbed me a little bit the wrong way, but they went over it quickly. They went over the animal part quickly. I like the evolution of the storytelling immersion that they told over the arc of the whole episode. So after the desert into a jungle and the Walt the Animal Man, then it put him into parent the parent role and the Griffith Park story and the Disneyland story. Um, they went into then how international travel was rare for most people. And here is where our favorite pro wrestler pops up for the first time, The Rock. What did you think of his part in this episode?
I would be very curious what the background was behind him producing this. Like what kind of conversation? Obviously, he's in the Jungle Cruise movie, but
Obviously, it was going to be a commercial for the movie.
yeah, but even then, it was a very short commercial. You know, it
Yeah,
was a very short commercial. It's not
and
like the
well
whole thing.
done. Well
Yeah,
done.
yeah, it was. In fact, I'm very excited to go see it. I'm excited to see the movie. I'm anticipating doing it on. I may just end up doing it on Disney Plus because I know I'm going to want to watch it over and over again. So I might just do that instead of going to the theater. But what I really liked about it was I learned more about The Rock that I didn't know before, and that was he was a legitimate fan. Like he was not, it was clear that he was not someone who was just there because I was in this movie. It
Yeah.
was clear that he's in the movie because he really liked Disneyland, and seeing him
And
in
that he
the
produced
shirt,
this show. Yeah.
and he
Yeah.
produced the show, and seeing him as a kid with the shirt with the
Yeah.
Mickey Mouse on.
Yeah.
And this was later on in the show, but him talking about how he had been a skipper at every Disney park in his head and
In his
had experienced
imagination. Yeah.
that. And
Well,
in fact, my
even
thought,
his sorry to cut you out, even his explanation of the backside of water bit. Like
oh, I
I've
thought the
never heard
same thing.
anyone like like it was simple, but somehow like it was still insightful how he interpreted that. Like, wow. Like,
Yeah. Well, what was cool
threw me
was I
off.
know how many times I thought as a kid, everyone else is laughing. I'm supposed like it's really innocent and shows the life of a child because
Yeah.
he was thinking everyone else is laughing. I should think this is funny, but that's not abnormal for a 10-year-old to think. That happens all the time. Why are I remember thinking that Seinfeld wasn't very funny as a kid. because I didn't know what the heck they were talking about. Yeah, I had no idea what was. I was like, this show's not that funny, and now it's my favorite show in the world. But so him saying that, and what I liked about it was hearing that here's this guy who's achieved like everything you could think of: pro wrestler, movie star, businessman, and all these amazing things. And here he is saying that one of my dreams never came true, and that was being a skipper on the Jungle Cruise. And then now it is in movie form, but it was cool to hear him. I loved it. I thought it was great.
He's so believable and relatable, like right
Yeah,
or wrong, whether it's a work or a shoot, brother.
you
I
would
don't,
never know.
yeah. And you know what? I don't care. I
Me
don't
neither.
care if it's a work or a shoot. You know
The
what I
Rock could say anything, and I'll
mean?
listen to it.
Yeah, yeah. But so he says that bit that the reason why Walt created the Jungle Cruise was to bring other parts of the world to the people. And then I love they did this a few times where they took something out of context and they misused it in a comedic way. And they took that little short black and white clip of Walt as if Walt is responding to The Rock. And he says, and Walt says, or The Rock says, bring other parts of the world to the people. And then Walt says, yeah, uh-huh. Like it was totally like,
Yeah,
I love to imagine that, like, oh yeah, Walt Disney and The Rock are sitting in a room and they're talking about this together, and we're all in the same room together talking about it.
yeah,
Through time and space, we're all talking about it together. You know what I mean?
yeah. I love their use of footage. Their use of footage from all sorts of different things. This is something I should have said at the beginning. But one thing I thought was brilliant was the way that they used footage of different frame sizes and did it by putting that
Yeah.
1950s looking TV frame around it.
Yep.
That was really cool because that's a big thing in documentaries. You're using old footage. How do you tackle that when it just looks bad? It's like there's the YouTube way of doing things where they put the blurry version behind, but it always looks cheesy.
Yeah.
This was cool. It was a cool way to do it.
Both there were a lot of more technical good choices there. Another one I liked was using footage of people from various times in their life. Like
Yes.
there, and it was the same person, and sometimes they had to even relabel the person
Yeah.
just so you knew. But like, it was just cool to see someone telling the same story over 50 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Of just clips, just tiny clips. I have one little complaint about how tiny some of the clips were. We'll come to in a second. But
This is short.
after that, they went into the section on Harper Goff, legendary Imagineer Harper Goff, and his set design. They used an awkward transition from we needed a guy that knew about wet things, and to go to Harper Goff. I wouldn't have used that awkward transition. I understand why they did, with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, being the pioneer of one of the pioneers of steampunk and the Nautilus and the squid. Like, okay, I get what they were trying to do, but I just would have said, there's no better set designer that Walt had at his fingertips than this guy. And I know why they didn't use this segue, but my favorite set that he has ever designed was Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh, wow. I didn't know he did that.
Yeah. Like, so when you think like we got to remember, not all the Imagineers were an Imagineer for Disney until the day they died. A lot of them worked for a lot of people. Yeah. Including Harper Goff. I think it's hilarious that the building practices of the day included him just getting out there with a stupid stick and drawing the banks of the river, but eyeballing it, telling the people that bulldozers where to dig.
While the bulldozers were already there. It wasn't even a different day. They didn't even go back and check it. But that's the thing. Now, right or wrong, I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying we should do this today. But the reason why they were able to build all of Disneyland, of course, it's nowhere near what it is today, but why were they able to build Disneyland in 1 year and it took like 3 years to build Galaxy's Edge, and it's taken like 4 years to build the Tron roller coaster. Now that might be a whole different story, but why were they able to do it in 1 year? A lot of it has to do with today that wouldn't be legal to
Yeah.
do because
Or
you'd have to
safe.
do it and then have it checked
Yep.
and then have it checked by someone else. Back then they're like, I mean, this looks good. Let's do
Yeah.
this. And then
Yeah.
bulldoze. Yeah, let's do it's fine. It'll be fine.
But nerve-wracking, and
Yeah.
stressful. And they say, Disney was built in a year. It was graded for about 6 or 7 months. And then it was actually built in 5 or 6, which is just nuts.
Yeah.
Okay, so but I wanted to look more into that. This episode made me want to dig deeper into the whole logistics behind land management, water management, where the water goes. I remember hearing a few years ago a story about how when they drained the subway to do Nemo, like they put all that water in the aquifer, the Anaheim aquifer, so they can go get it back out later, so they wouldn't be wasting. And like, I wanted to look more into that. I remember another a Fresh Baked episode I saw once where he talked about all the connected waterways and how the rivers of America and the Jungle Cruise and the water out in front of Frontierland, like it's all like connected. Like I forgot what was and wasn't connected, but like, so that same green dye and the same circulation and the management and how and why and what's used as rain runoff and what isn't, and how they, because like we're in a drought, and like
how do they manage all that water?
Yeah.
That's really interesting. And this is a side note. If you look at a similar thing, but at Magic Kingdom, there is water that is, and all you have to do is look for the signs, but there's water in the Magic Kingdom that is, it's contained, and it's just that area. It's completely contained. And then there's other water that isn't contained that goes out to other drains and other things. And it doesn't mean that there's necessarily alligators in there at any given time, but it does mean that alligators can be in there. So like the rivers of America, there's a sign that says that there may be alligators in here. It's just crazy to think like I think there's dinosaurs that live in there. It's nuts. It's crazy. But it is cool to think about that, like, oh, in the rivers of America, there could be alligators in here, but it all has to do with what water is contained and what water is connected into other parts and other places.
But see, I'm just fascinated by the mere fact that we're talking about some sort of technical logistic, like water resource management, in a conversation about themed entertainment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's what I love about how deep this gets and how rich it gets. And like there's things about building in a swamp. There's things about building in a desert. There's things about building in other countries. There's things, you see what I mean? Like and it's funny how nature always finds a way, because
really, Jeff,
Jeff Copeland, in every right way and wrong way. Have you ever walked behind the back of Main Street, and you get to walk by the where they park the Jungle Cruise boats?
No, I've never been back there.
Like back. So sometimes they open it up during parades or when it's busy.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. There's the bypass.
So like now they have those big tarps there, so you can't really see anything, right? But I've looked down there. I've seen dead fish in the water. But then it's like, wait a minute, they don't stock the Jungle Cruise with real fish.
Yeah, so where did the fish come from?
Nature finds a way, man.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's just to think like 60 years ago, 65, 67 years ago, whatever, they Harper Goff with a stick dug this ditch. They planted it with seeds that Bill and Jack Evans imported illegally from all over the world to make their nursery, to fight with other landscape designers about how to best do this and save trees from the freeway being built and buy trees from local people in the neighborhood and try to put save orange trees and pluck the oranges off because there's no oranges in a jungle, and then build all this thing and then create a flipping ecosystem where
Yeah.
nature finds a way and fish just show up and voluntarily show up in there. Who knows how, right?
That's crazy.
And then some nerd like me notices him floating dead in the water, probably seeing something he's not supposed to see.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
That's crazy to think about though. Like, cause yeah. And when you were talking before about desert and swamp, I never thought about that. We just think, oh, well, they just duplicated Disneyland with some changes and put it in Florida. But from this episode, we're pointed out there's a complete desert, absolutely looked nothing like it does now. And then when they go and try to do it again, they're building it on a swamp, completely the opposite. It's really interesting.
yeah, yeah. And not to tease, but in the next episode,
Yes, yes, they talk more
they
about
talk
that with
more
the
about that.
land, the
Yeah.
water levels.
But we'll talk about that one next time. But so we got Bill Evans. They didn't bring up Jack Evans' brother, but I remembered that from that podcast.
From DHI, yeah.
Brings up another lady that was very important and very involved. I remember watching this episode thinking that Bill Evans was a bad guy, not a good guy like this episode portrayed him as, because of how much he got into it. Him and his brother got into it with Ruth Shellhorn, the landscape architect for all of Disneyland. She was hired kind of after the fact. I love the fact that Walt always drew from the people most closely around him.
Yeah.
Bill and Jack Evans do his backyard. Hey, you guys can do my park.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, you guys actually can't do my park because you're not actually landscape architects, but you're fantastic plant nurserymen. You can do the jungle cruise, but I need someone else to sort of tie it all together, tie the whole park together. And that's what Ruth Shellhorn was hired for. But those 3 episodes in Disney History Institute podcast,
Cool.
all about her. They all played nice. Bill Evans always said it was a team effort. She said it was a team effort. Everyone didn't talk crap about each other, and that's good and professional. She actually did one of her first jobs was South Pasadena High School.
Yes, my alma mater,
right.
and your our parents' alma
I
mater.
thought that was a fun connection, but that brings up that that begs the question. Todd James Pierce was in this episode.
Yeah, I thought it was so cool.
So then I was thinking, wait a minute, did the producers of this episode listen to those episodes of his podcast and then ask him to be on here for 14 seconds? Or
he's not on it much.
Or was he interviewed for this and then that inspired him to dig deeper? And then he made those 3 episodes. I don't know how the chronology works. I don't know what came first and what was produced.
Those were a long time ago.
No, they weren't that long ago. I went back and looked.
Really?
Well, maybe I need to go back and look again. We can correct it in the comments, but yeah, I wonder what.
I thought those were pre-pandemic.
I don't remember, but still, it's just a fascinating question about process, right? Like, how?
Well, also you got to think that he's also an author, writes a lot of Disney books as well.
Sure.
I'm willing to bet that they listened to some of his stuff because he is thorough. And as we talked about last week, it's scholarship. He is a college professor. And so with all of that being said, I think that they probably did listen to him. I do wish that they had a little more of him. We did cheat and go ahead over the next 5 episodes. I only remember seeing him one more time.
I don't even remember one more.
There's one more, and it's just as short.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sure I don't remember which one it is, but when we come to that episode, we'll watch that 2 or 3 times before having this conversation. So we'll find it.
We'll talk about him again, I'm sure, and hopefully
we'll talk about him almost every episode.
Yeah. But so that was in a section that I really liked, that they used the Walt quote talking about how there was a mad rush at the end there to open the park. They needed to pay off debts. They needed to, make some money here quick. And him and the TV show. And he says, about sharing the joys and anxieties of our race against time.
Yeah.
That idea of sharing anxieties and being vulnerable and being relatable and being that perfect Uncle Walt persona, like so relatable to be willing to show some mistakes and some self-deprecating humor both then and now. And like in this even in Disney approving this show, right? And
Yeah.
this some of the self-deprecating humor in the show, like, and they show Art Linkletter and him walking away, and she says, no matter how, the narrator said something like,
No
as
matter how
awkward,
awkward it
yeah,
was.
yeah, and when they're all like awkward about their arms and the cords and everything, like,
When they dropped the mic and Walt
yeah, yeah,
tried to catch it.
yeah,
It just looked awkward. Yeah, the
and I
whole thing
love it.
looked awkward.
And then the idea that more than half of the United States was watching that.
Yeah, in fact, I wrote that down right here. They said 90 million people were watching it, and at the time there was 170 million population. And you think about that, 170 million includes 3-year-olds, it includes infants, and it includes 90-year-olds. So I mean, that's crazy how many people are watching that.
That's crazy, man. Like, and to be willing to be like, how high his anxieties and stress and adrenaline must have been that day, live, that many people, there, that many people on TV, that many things going wrong,
Yeah.
and having a smile on your face the whole time. Like,
It's one of the things I love about Walt is just his entrepreneurial courage. He's willing to say, I'm going to do it. And I don't care if there's going to be problems with it, even though there's going to be critics that are going to say what was wrong. But the truth is, I did it and they didn't. And if I worried about all of those things being perfect, I wouldn't have done it because there's no way to do it. And it's just, I love that. I love
well,
that about him.
and it's not just being blind to his haters,
No.
because real critique he would hear.
Yeah.
And I love how they showed that in this episode, where they talk about that mom who said, he overhears that mom saying, oh, honey, we don't need to write that again. We've done that before. And he's like, whoop.
Yeah.
And he's like, we need to change. As long as there is imagination, Disneyland will never be finished. You got Kim Irvine saying, oh, we'll always have a castle and we'll always have a Jungle Cruise. So I love, like, she reiterated, like, the ideas of some of the things that will always be there in some form. But she said, a Jungle Cruise, a castle. She didn't say this Jungle Cruise or that Jungle Cruise. And so I was fascinated in this episode by the way they talked about evolution and change and creative process, and how some piece of art could be finished and presented to the public and then changed again and still embraced. And what's the essence that stays the same? And then how do we embrace change? Right.
Yeah.
And then it seems like, they talk about going from serious to being funny, bringing in the gag man, Mark Davis, with his great gags. Go ahead.
Let me go back somewhere before we get into that, because this
sorry.
interesting.
Go ahead.
Brings up something interesting. At one point,
I was just looking at the clock. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know, but we got to say this here.
Okay, go.
So, what they said it. This was later on. They're talking about the gags, but they said the words, irritating super fans is what they talked about. They talked about irritating super fans. And I think right now that was about people who were demanding them to say the backside of water joke, that they're, or no, aggravating. That was what they said, aggravating super fans. And I wonder if a part of Disney getting behind this, other than just creating great content and that kind of thing, they might have greenlit this back when they didn't know when the parks would open again. Maybe we need to get this out to have things for people to watch at home. But I wonder if their PR department said, we need to educate our super fans on the fact that our rides have always changed throughout history. Because what people are saying is like, well, it's always been the same. Well, it's been the same in your lifetime. doesn't mean I thought about that during that was,
For sure.
is this part of why they
For
did
sure.
this?
For sure.
Because of the big change that just happened on Jungle Cruise.
That's exactly where I was going. Right.
Okay, okay,
And,
cool.
and you know, the way they overlap this awkward Venn diagram between like the stupid dad jokes that everyone knows and loathes, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But still, if you don't say one, they'll call you out on it, right? And then like the evolution of technology, and then the evolution of cultural sensitivity, and then she says the line about that some where's the line? I'm sorry. The line about some of the stereotypes being some gags based on stereotypes that are now recognized as inappropriate.
Yeah.
And then she moved on. That left me wanting more. Where's that segment about the new? Where's the segment about the changes? That must have been a conscious choice to leave it out, because if South Park can produce an episode in a week, they certainly, I don't care when the show was produced, they could have produced something last week and snuck it in for
Yeah.
10 seconds, but they didn't, which was a choice, I think, to perfectly front load and prep and prepare and whatever the general audience for exactly what you just said,
Yeah.
or exactly why you just said it.
Well, it could also be kind of I mean, maybe they have maybe their PR team has some psychologists in there as well, because if they tell us what that means, then we're going to be skeptical. But if you let us
Yep.
make the logical conclusion, then we believe it. But if they put that in,
I don't mean to project that on there, but I'm glad that you're picking up the same thing I am. Like, it begs the question, there must be something like that going on.
Yeah.
But in addition to that point, they plugged Trader Sam.
They did. Yeah, I was interested in that.
They plug his tiki bar.
Yep.
But they don't refer to him, if you noticed, as a shrunken head salesman.
They don't. They refer to him as the friend. Yeah.
They totally changed his backstory to the friend of the skippers who collects things. Like,
yes,
okay,
yes.
Okay.
When you said something that I thought was really good, that they said they said that are now recognized as inappropriate. They didn't say that are now inappropriate. That used to be appropriate.
That was a well-written line.
It was a well-written line. And plugging another YouTuber, looking at Mark Brickey, the Adventures in Design. He had a whole episode about this, about the changes of the Jungle Cruise. And he said, well, I hear people all the time like, well, I'm not offended by that. And he said, look, I wasn't offended by it either, but I don't look like Trader Sam. And so I don't think I have the right to say that I'm not offended and therefore it shouldn't be changed. And he went all through a lot of those different things. And I thought it was a very interesting perspective that he brought up about just that idea of cultural sensitivity. And do I have the right to be the one to say I'm not offended when it's not the people who look like me who are the butt of the jokes in the rhino scene, literally the butt of the joke.
And appropriateness is not a democracy either.
Very good point. Very good point. Yeah.
But so I'm not trying to rush to the end, but I loved how they talked about how the differences of this ride in other parks,
Yes, I love that.
In the context of evolution too. But then they recap the episode with Harper Goff, Bill Evans, Mark Davis, Walt's great quote about, I think when you do something well enough, the public is going to pay you back for it. I'm glad that the corporation,
love that.
I'm glad that the penny pinching corporation allowed these producers to include that line specifically.
Yes.
And then they talk about his full vision of having a ride with real animals was finally realized in Animal Kingdom. Have you been to Animal Kingdom?
Yeah, many, yeah,
Yeah.
multiple times. I love it. I
I've,
love it.
I've been there a couple times. I remember thinking like, oh yeah, they're being real careful about doing a zoo right and doing a zoo well. But I do remember when it opened, there was some controversy about several of the animals dying
Yeah.
unexpectedly, but so there's some critique of that park. There was some culturally insensitive stuff about poachers that was removed
Uh-huh.
from the big safari ride at one point. But then there's other things that the park does really right. Like there was some story about the first endangered white rhino born in
Mhm.
captivity or something. Like so there. I don't know how to most appropriately, ethically critique them from that context, but I'm glad that at least they're striving to do the right and inspire us to care. I
Yes.
I love that. Um, Part of the reason I care so much about the environment and about the world in general and about the climate and about animals is because of Disney, you
Yes.
know. And even if some of the ways Disney taught me about those things aren't perfect, you know,
Totally.
like
Totally.
I I
Well,
I
you
care.
remember in Imagineering story,
Yeah.
Jane Goodall talks about Animal Kingdom and talks about how they really tried to do their best and they were striving and improving and all those things. Um, I have kind of a controversial, not controversial opinion, just controversial preference. To me, um, Animal Kingdom is actually my favorite non-castle park.
Oh, dang.
Yeah,
Even
I love it.
that
I love Animal Kingdom.
you're talking to a member of the Ep cult right here. Like,
I
so I can't even go there with you, but I do love it. I do
Yeah,
love it.
I
Yeah.
love that place. It's amazing. I love it.
Yeah.
By the way, breaking the fourth wall for everyone. Um, I can go all the way up to the half hour, so we can do that.
Okay. 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 So they close off the episode with how the Jungle Cruise legacy, uh, they drew this through line from the Jungle Cruise to every sort of immersive experience and sort of linked it all the way up to the cream of the crop today, Rise of the Resistance. I'm surprised how they squeezed Star Wars into this thing, but it does make sense. But I just thought that was a good sort of through line from the evolution of the immersive themed space experience and then the reasons why behind it, right? To
Yeah.
have people have this experience and then what it would encourage them to do more. Does it inspire you to care more about the environment? Does it inspire you to travel? Does it inspire you to donate to some wildlife refuge? Does it inspire you to go and solve climate change? Does it inspire you to create art? What does it inspire you to do? What does it call you to do? For me, this episode inspired me to look some more things up, to do a little research on some of those land and resource and water management practices, best practices of this company or others. Understand a little more about that, not just because we're living in a drought, but because we should all be more informed. But it made me excited to do that. It made me excited to talk about the next episodes with you. But I encourage everyone watching or anyone watching to add to that conversation in the comments below. What did it inspire you to want to do, or go watch or learn more about? Jake, what did it do for you? What did it call you to do?
The first thing that it called me to do is to take Walt's example of learning to not take everything so seriously. Is that he was someone who brought this whole thing together, wanted to have this really incredible thing for people, but he took it so seriously. He took the work seriously and then missed out on the fun, missed out on the laughter that came with it. Sometimes, like in my personal life, I'm just joke all the time, but sometimes I can take my work too seriously. And so hearing that was really a great thing. Love that. The idea of adding more humor. And then the other thing was um I realized that was on the next episode. I got connected
No
to
cheating.
another
No
episode.
cheating. Save it. Put a pin in
I'll
it.
save it to
Put
the
a
other
pin
one.
in it.
So I'll have
But that's a good segue right there. Our next episode, what can you, the audience, expect? Our next episode, there's a tease.
yeah.
Will
So
be about the
absolutely.
Haunted Mansion episode of Behind the Attraction. We'll review
Yes.
that. We might have someone with us. We might not again.
Yes, that's true. He might be a ghost. It might be a ghost. But yes, the other one that I wrote down, I realized was because I cheated and went ahead. So I will wait for that one until next week.
But it's not cheating because there's no rules.
Yes,
so we want to
yes.
encourage everyone out there, keep consuming, keep creating.
And always remember